Hi, I'm Steve Graziani. I've been down here in the Frogtown area for quite a while. I had a house up on the top of the hill from 85 to 2010, but I had a studio down here doing sculptures. Then I ended up ultimately moving down here in 2010. So I live in an artist loft called Blake Avenue Lofts. It's filled with like a lot of my work because I was better at creating things than I was at marketing them. So when I first was down here in Frogtown, all the stuff around here, sculptures. And then ultimately, as I kept going around in here, I ended up moving towards paintings and all that as I lost the sculpting studio or closed down the sculpting studio. And then things kept progressing and I moved it towards doing etchings. I'm not an artist that does an art to be like a printmaker. I do art to tell a story. It doesn't matter really what medium I jump to. Etchings were easier on my back too. So, but you're basically seeing my Disneyland. I'm fairly lucky because in the middle of a pandemic, I have enough stuff to do here. I have friends that say that they're going nuts watching television. So, I'm in a pretty good situation. Anyway, I started doing the etchings to go along with short stories I write, because I write horror stories as well. And the etchings at first went to go with the stories, then the etchings became a thing that actually took over, and they became stories themselves. So basically, I do the etchings. I try to sell them at conventions that are dealing with sci-fi and horror world. Obviously, this year there aren't any. And this is sort of the etching wall. This is what I call my bargain matinee wall. A long time ago when I used to do film, I did my first film with Roger Corman back in 1980. And at that time, every film got to see a matinee. It went to a theater. Nowadays, it doesn't happen that way. But back then, you always had at least one moment of hero. So what I do is when I complete an etching, it gets put on the wall for a little while. Then eventually, things that I don't like as much come off the wall, newer ones go on. But everything gets its matinee. Anyway, this is my studio, in the middle of my studio. One of the things that surprised me when I was doing a thing called Midsummer Scream is that people didn't understand the difference between prints and an etching. This is a print. This is a high-quality G-clay print that's done of one of my paintings. It's a photograph of my painting, and I have a printing shop do it. This is an etching, where this is an example of an etching, though. It's actually hand-pulled through there, an individual plate, and each pull through adds different dimensions to the piece. So basically, you're dealing with an etching plate like this. You're using acid to go ahead and carve into the plate, and where you carve in, it gathers ink, and the ink gets transferred when you do a print. Now, just to show the process, I went ahead and pre-inked this one plate. Basically, what you have to do when you're doing etchings is you do all that. This is about 14 different burns. Some of them are as much as 5 seconds, some of them are like 2 minutes. Each one burns a little bit more on there to get the coloration I want. Here's an example. The lines come from scratching a line into hard ground. That creates your lines in the drawing. Then when you want to create gray tones, you go ahead and paint in what's called asphaltum. Now, when you burn, it will burn the area that's not painted. So it grays it. So here's a plate that has already been inked. Press. I'm not being as clean as I should be because of this. That's the reason it's so frustrating that people thought etchings were prints that somebody else printed for you, because each one of these, it's a limited number edition, and each one is pulled. And I think about 2 out of every 3 of mine come out savable. I throw away 1 out of every 3 at least. Get it a little slightly damp. A little press. Newsprint on it. And then crank it down through. Guaranteeing how this one's going to come out, but but you're putting it through a very high pressure press that's coming down with 3 blankets, so it's squeezing it down into every little groove. That one came out pretty good.
All right. Wow. That's great.
It's called Nature Bites Back.
Nice.
One of the few that I do for. Normally my etchings go into the territory of staying with horror films or horror stories and all that. But with the pandemic that's happened, some of my etchings have come out talking about the current day. But they're still telling stories. So basically, I'm just saying hi from the art walk, that I'm grateful to be here. I've been part of the art walk since the very first one. Hopefully next year we'll be able to do it in person again, because the art walk's not really about selling. It's really about getting to know the neighbors. When we first did the first art walk, a great deal of the neighborhood didn't want us to do it. They were afraid of it. After we did it, everybody ended up wanting it again and again. It became so peaceful. So I'm glad it keeps progressing. I'm sorry we had to do it remotely this year. Anyway, if you want to take a look at my etchings at all, you can take a look at them at www.grazarts.com. And I have them for sale there, so you just contact me if something interests you.